What's going on, good people? Adrian Homeboy Holmes here to welcome you to the new season of Super Gamer Book Club. New season? Where's the old season, I hear you say? Well, you can find all the episodes of the old season from our original book club host Zetch on our Patreon. And you can also find the newest episodes of season 2 with host me, ding, on Patreon as well. Me, Garrett, and a special guest every month choose a game and we go over it and talk about it in a shorter, more informal kind of setting. It's almost like we're just hanging out and telling what we liked about the game, what we didn't like about the game, so on and so forth. So we decided this is too cool to sit behind Patreon for all of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some of the older episodes and put them out on this free podcast feed for you guys. And if you want to check out the new episodes of stuff that we're doing, you can go and subscribe to our Patreon for only $1 and you get the brand new book club episodes when they come out. That's all I got for right now. I hope you enjoy the episode and I hope you come to see what we have on Patreon. Take it easy and enjoy the show. What's going on, good people? Welcome to episode 9 of Super Gamer Book Club. We are so glad to have you all here. Of course, I'm here, your host, Adrian Homeboy Holmes. And with me tonight is, of course, our leader, host, captain, and dad, Mr. Garrett Morlang. How you doing, good sir?
I'm doing fantastic. You know, maybe slightly more depressed after playing this game. But, you know, if anything, maybe, you know what the takeaway was? At least I'm not a Finch.
Of course, if you don't know what that means, the game that we have picked for this episode of Super Gamer Book Club for the month of April is the 2017, in my opinion, modern classic, What Remains of Edith Finch. Now, if you've never heard of this one, it's a 2017 title by Giant Sparrow, which follows the, I guess you could say, misfortunes of the Finch family, who is a rich European immigrated family that moves to America and seems to be followed by a curse in which most members of this family end up dying in some sort of way. And it has gone on for the past 500 years that the family has been, around. Or so we think. The description for the game from the creators, Giant Sparrow, it goes like this. It says, What Remains of Edith Finch is a collection of strange tales about a family in Washington state. As Edith, you'll explore the colossal Finch house, searching for stories as she explores her family history and tries to figure out why she's the last one in her family left alive. Each story you find lets you experience the life of a new family member on the day of their death, with stories ranging from the distant past to the present day. Now, that sounds kind of grim, but let me kind of break it down so it makes sense. So, this term has, or this game has, throughout the zeitgeist, has earned the, I don't appreciate it, the derogatory term of a walking simulator game, in which people like to make the joke that all you do is walk and there's nothing really going on. There's no game, which couldn't be further from the truth. So these kinds of games, I always feel like it's not necessarily about the gameplay itself, but sometimes they do things to make the elements of the gameplay more involved. But they're really trying to tell you a story, which is perfectly valid, in my opinion, as far as a game or game design. It still counts as, if you have to interact with the medium, that makes it a game in my eyes. So I don't know how you feel about it, Garrett, but
Yeah, I mean, if there's any sort of, because I mean, if there was no interactiveness, then at that point it's just a movie,
right.
So the fact that there is, like, you're moving around, there's very, like, minor puzzle type thing elements in there, ultimately you are controlling this character. Like, yeah, it's a game, and to be honest, like, it's a very impactful game despite it being simple. Like even though it's not like, running or like sliding, through behind cover and crawling
Hmm.
through vents, and well, actually,
Shooting
I think you
stuff
do.
or
I think
jumping
you,
over stuff or
I think
fighting. Yeah.
I think there are moments actually where you crawl through vents, but
Well,
it's not the action packed thing. It's like, okay, like no, this is still very much a game. It's still very much just as impactful as any of those other games could possibly be, even though it's not action packed in the like. So yeah, I was very impressed with this game, and having not really played a lot of quote unquote walking simulators. Yeah, again, I was very impressed with this.
So let's give it a little bit of a setup. So the game starts off with basically in this game you take the perspective of Edith, who is, as the description said from the developer, the last Finch that's left alive. Um, you are returning to your old family home. Edith is about 17 years old at this time, and she's returning to her family home because she wants to uncover some of the mystery of basically her family and their relationship with what seems to be, or what the matriarch of the family, which is her great grandmother Edie, what she believes to be is a family curse. So you end up back at the Finch house, which, if we can take a moment to pivot right here, this house is such an anomaly to me. I don't know how you feel, but there is, when we talked about world building, when we did the BioShock episode, and I was like, this feels like somewhere you could actually visit, and it all makes architectural sense. Like, it seems crazy the way that they put it together, but I feel like this could be a house somewhere in the wilds of Washington.
Hmm.
Um, everything about this house is just detailed to perfection. I mean, they thought about everything, every room. They made it feel lived in. There were books and things that your family would have in their house. It
Hmm.
None of it ever felt fake. As astronomical and as cartoony sometimes as the house felt, it all felt like it could actually exist, like it could be built and it could be explored.
Yeah, I feel like it's like as you said, like it's bizarre in the way that it's structured. Because yeah, when you see it, you first walk up on it, it's like, oh, it's like this from the distance, almost looks like it has a big like spire or tower, almost like a castle like. And as you get closer, you're like, oh no, this is like backwoods redneck like add-ons going on, like where they're just like using trash to build new rooms on there. But yeah, you're 100% right. Where you walk inside, and I'm like, oh, this is a lived-in house. Like it looks like, there's like literally rooms where I'm like, oh, this reminds me of like my great grandparents' house, and I used to go visit them when I was a kid, or oh yeah, okay, this is reminiscent of so and so, and like yeah, it is very true to form with like, oh yeah, like there's even a room in there where there's like as like a um oh, I forget, it's the twins, and on the one side it's space, on the other side it's military themed. On the military side, I was looking at it, I'm like, oh man, like that looks literally just like something my brother would have in his room when we were kids. And I mean, and he did, like well, it was a military, but my dad built an actual like tree stand. My brother was super into hunting. My dad is into hunting. We were all into hunting, but my brother had like this tree stand with an actual tree like mounted in the corner of his room, so that way he could play like hunting. He'd go up there
Hmm.
with his little bow and all in camo and just like sit there in the corner of his room. And like, so like going in that room where it's like there's the space pod, and on the other side it's a mill. I'm like, oh man, like this is totally something like my dad would have done in our rooms if we had asked him to, like, hey, can you make a little military bunker, up in our room or something. And yeah, so it was just very, very yeah, like kind of cartoonish, but and even like you just, yeah, very unique on one hand, and on the other hand very like familiar.
Hmm.
So it made it very
I
yeah,
mean,
easily to like relate to.
it makes sense because I feel like maybe I would say the two main characters are definitely Edie, or not Edie, Edith,
Edith, yeah.
and the house. I feel like the house is also a main character in the story itself. So the way that this game works is you as Edith are going throughout the house, and all the rooms in the house have been sealed off because your great grandmother Edie, and to a lesser extent your mom, have this kind of superstitious belief that there's a curse on the family, and they're trying to contain whatever it is so that it doesn't continue to kill the rest of the Finches. But of course, Edith, now owning the property since she's the last surviving Finch, has access to different areas of the house that she never did before. And the house is full of different secret passageways and backways and ladders and all these different kind of things. And you end up making your way into the rooms that, since Edith was a kid, she never was able to go into. And she finds different things in these family members' rooms, like journals or photographs or letters or anything like that, that would explain how this person died, and it would kind of give her an insight into exactly either how they happened, but it would be a fantastical version of it. So, for example, the first room that most people go into is the room of their family member, Molly. She's a young girl who, unfortunately, is also one of the many Finches who have died over the years. She was one of the older generations. And when you pick up her journal, it kind of fades to black, and then it comes back and it starts to tell a story. You can tell you are Molly. And it talks about she was sent to bed with no dinner, and she was incredibly hungry, and she's looking all over her room for something to eat. So she thinks about eating her goldfish. She doesn't do it. She eats a stale carrot in her hamster cage. She goes and eats a batch of wild berries, which are highly poisonous. She also eats an entire tube of toothpaste, which is also extremely poisonous. And the story sees her looking around, and there's a bird that comes to her windowsill. And all of a sudden, she opens the window and jumps out to it and turns into a cat. And she starts chasing the bird as the cat, and she catches the bird eventually and falls off a tree. But she doesn't fall to the ground. She kind of swoops back up because she's turned from a cat into an owl. And all the time she's using these animals as feeding. So she's an owl and she's feeding on rabbits, or she's a cat and she's feeding on birds. Then she turns into a shark and she's eating on what was it, manatees or a walrus or something like that, or a sea lion.
It was like seal or sea lion or something like that. Yeah.
Right. And then the last thing is she turns into this sea monster, or that gets on board a ship and starts to eat humans.
That part's so cool.
Yeah.
I love the tentacles like moving around and stuff. Yeah. So it's such fun,
sick.
Such a fun way to again, to take this walking simulator and be like, okay, you're not walking anymore. Now they go through all these different animals, and now you're gotta slither around. It feels so cool.
And then finally, the monster ends up back in your house, and it looks like it's gonna end up eating Molly. And Molly, of course, the monster turns back into Molly, and she still believes that it's under her bed. And she's writing things such as like, the monster is coming for me now. I know it's only a matter of time. I don't have much time left, but both I and the monster know I'm gonna be delicious. Just to end it all, because that she's pretty much getting out of here. And that is the fantastical element of it on the surface. But of course, that's an embellishment, because that's what the family wants you to think, or that's what Edie, who's the matriarch, wants you to think, because she has this, I don't know if I would call it like an obsession with death, and she uses these stories, these embellishments, to kind of maybe soften the blow of her having to deal with all of her family dying. And the real way Molly died, that's inferred, is that she was poisoned because she ate berries and a full thing of toothpaste and probably died overnight.
Yeah.
But it's easier for Edie. It's more comforting for the grandmother to just be like, oh yeah, this fantastical thing happened, and it's a story, you know. And then this kind of pattern proceeds to happen all throughout the rooms and the areas that you visit through the house. So I hate to, you know, put the twist up, but it's not really a twist up front. It's kind of like you can understand what's going on if you just kind of step back and take a quick analytical look at things. Clearly, you know, there's not somebody turning into cats and birds and sharks.
Well, I mean, you don't know.
Or is there? Because there are a
Or
couple
is
of them
there?
that play with that idea.
Yeah.
So I guess now that we kind of got the idea and the premise of it out of the way, Garrett, I've been waiting. We haven't really talked about it since we decided on it. What did you think about this game overall?
So overall, I really enjoyed it. I've said this 100 times on the podcast, 1,000 times maybe even. I just love games with a good story. I don't necessarily play, although gameplay like helps with the enjoyment of a game. I've never been one to like jump in and just play a multiplayer game for the gameplay. It's like if I'm going to be spending time, wasting time playing video games, like give me something good out of it. Mm-hmm. And so jumping into this and as we talked about, like gameplay is very simple. It's not non-existent, but just simple. And then, but having like such a right off the bat, very interesting story, like starting it off just like with little hints here and there from Edith about like what, like she doesn't straight up say like there's a weird curse and all this stuff, but just kind of like hinting at weird things with the family and blah, blah, blah. And she's the last surviving one. And it was just right off the bat, a neat hook. And then again, when you discover the house, you're like, I really got to know what's going on inside this house. Like yes. I can't not go in there. So I overall, like I really enjoyed it because it was right off the bat, a good hook, great story throughout. And like, again, the simple gameplay is enough to enhance the story and not hinder or be annoying or anything like that. So I loved it. I thought it was great. And being a quick play, you know, not having a lot of time to play video games in general, when you can beat it in like 3.5, 4 hours, that's nice too.
That's what I try to do, man. I try to, you know, be able to help us to get an experience in, to get something out of it and to keep it moving on to the next thing. I love that this game kind of, it rides the line between, I guess maybe like a how would I put it? It almost rides the horror line at sometimes. Just the vibe that it gives off. I feel like just the way that the house is built and the way that there is like it's like a morbid museum in a sense, because these are all like rooms of dead people. Like everyone in this house that ever lived in this house is dead. And none of their stuff has been touched. None of their stuff has been moved. Nothing like, I mean, it's all there from when they left that house to do whatever they were going to do. It's exactly the same. It's kind of that, it gives off that eerie vibe, like it's haunted in a sense.
Yeah. I remember when this game was first like announced and even released. I remember hearing about it, even though it is kind of considered like a smaller game. Like, is it? I guess are they an indie developer? Is that was it kind of done under an indie label? I guess. Yeah. Like so, it's a very small team and a smaller game. But I remember hearing about it and being like, "Oh, that game looks so spooky and creepy." Like that's I honestly thought it was going to be more of a horror game. Until you kind of start playing through it and it's like, oh, this is very different. This is not that at all. Although it is like creepy And as you said, like morbid, that's a perfect word for it, because it's literally all these rooms showcasing these dead people's lives. You literally go outside at one point. There's the family graveyard. You walk through the graveyard and you're looking at all the tombstones and stuff like that. Like, it really is a museum of the dead. Like, that's what it is.
Absolutely.
Just so bizarre. So it's like has this little bit of like creepiness to it, where you keep thinking like, when's the twist? When's something weird gonna happen?
They play really well with that, like flirting with, oh, is there a supernatural element here? Oh, I don't know. Did those stories actually happen? Maybe,
Yeah.
And I think that was definitely on purpose.
Yeah, and it was fantastically done, like the way they did it. Like, it wasn't too much. It was just the right amount of balance to be like, keep you on the edge and in guessing throughout, thinking like, is it, come on, something. And then when it finally ends, like, even when it ends, you're still kind of left like, I don't know, maybe there was a curse. It's pretty bizarre.
It's pretty
in a way.
convincing the way you're all dying. But
Yeah.
was there any? So we got about maybe about 10 stories or so of the Finch family overall. I say between 10 and 11.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, something like that. I forget exactly, but I think it was around 11 or so. It was a good chunk of the family tree for sure.
Yeah. Did any of the family member stories stick out for you?
Yeah, I think my favorite one, just because I really enjoyed the way they told the story. I was like, this is really fun, and actually even like amped up the creepiness. Like, even though it was silly, and honestly, it was actually like creepier to me, was Barbara's.
Yeah, that was a good one.
With the comic book, and it's just like kind of tales from the crypt type thing, like as like this guy, like this creepy monster creature, like coming out and telling you the story of how Barbara died. It's just like with the like creepy music in the background, and like there's honestly like points where it almost got like the jump scare. Like, it's literally just like
I was waiting for it.
It's literally showing pages, just a comic book flipping through, and like kind of like an animated graphic novel type thing. And there is right towards the end where it's like, oh man, God, okay, like that had me all amped up. Like, you almost got me there. Very good. I like that. So for like how they had fun like telling that story, like I really enjoyed that one. Another one that stands out, man, is just because of how sad it is. And I think it really hit me more because I have two kids of my own. And honestly, this is something that I'm always scared of. Like, honestly, with my own kids, like it terrifies me.
I know where you're going.
You hear these horror stories. But yeah, Gregory, where, he was in the tub playing with some toys, and it's such like a cutesy fun segment, and like I was having a blast, like the music playing. I started popping trophies left and right because I'm like getting all the toys off the tub, and you couldn't control this little frog, and you're like activating the little army men or like the rubber duckies or what, like you're just getting all the toys dancing to the music and moving around, and then all of a sudden, like, the mom walks away, and what is it? She pulls the plug, and then Gregory puts it back in, and somehow he turns the water back on. And she left the room. She's not even in the bathroom anymore, and it's inferred that he drowned. Like, that's what happened. He drowns in the bathtub. And holy cow! Like, when I did that segment, like, what the are you kidding me? Like that, I was having so much fun. Like, that was so awesome. And then
you
it
forgot
just like
what game you were playing, sir.
Yeah, 100%. Like, you literally like get lost in that moment, and then it takes this turn. You're like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, literally one of my worst nightmares, like, that I'm always terrified of anytime my kids are in the bathtub or near a pool or anything. Like, okay, there you go. Just did it right in front of you. I'm like, oh my God. Freaking, oh my God. That one, like, honestly kind of like scarred me a little bit. The other one I had, Barbara, I enjoyed. That was fun. This, I'm like, screw this game. Like, oh man, that stuck with me a while. Like, I was
when I hear
really
people
sad.
talk about this game, that's definitely one of the ones that always gets brought up is Gregory's story, because he only maybe made it almost a year.
Yeah, he's like the
And
same age as my youngest Griffin right now. So like that's the other thing. It's like, oh, okay, so this kid who's the same age as, my son, this man, horrible. Hate this game. No, this game's great.
one of my favorites is the one you were talking about with the twins, the Army twin and the Space Cadet twin.
Yeah.
The one where you're on the swing.
Oh, yeah.
And Sam wrote the poem about his brother, and he was like, this is how I want to remember my brother. And it starts with you as Sam's brother Calvin, and you're in your spaceman helmet, and your mom's calling you to come in to dinner. And outside the house, there's this tree that has a real big swing on it. And you're in, of course, Calvin's shoes, and the game lets you, the interactive element is you start swinging the swing. And you swing the swing harder and harder and harder as the poem goes on. And Sam is telling you things like, the one thing I remember about my brother is that when he put his mind to something, he does it. And it's just going through like that. It's reading through the poem. And of course, the one big thing that every kid always wants to do on a swing is to go over the top.
Heck yeah.
And so Calvin actually manages to do so. And he does it a few times. And the last line of the poem is, I'll never forget when my brother decided he wanted to fly. And he did. And I don't know, that's really kind of, it's sweet in a weird way, because of course in reality his brother flew off the swing and fell over. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't explain. The swing oversees a cliff.
The whole
out
house
to
is
the
built.
ocean.
Yeah, the house is basically built on a sheer cliff into the ocean, like 100 feet down. And so yeah, there's like a single tree like 10 feet from the edge of this cliff, and that's where the swing is. Very bad, like very poorly planned spot for a swing, to be honest.
Absolutely.
I feel like a lot of their desks are kind of just like straight up neglect, from Gregory being neglected, left in a tub, to like, why did you build a swing next to the freaking cliff? Why didn't you just feed her some dinner? Like a whole lot of neglect in this family. Maybe it's not a curse, it's just a bunch of idiots. That's what it is.
Exactly. That's the thing, is
a lot of careless people.
It's a lot of unfortunate things that happen to this family, but it wasn't because of a curse. It's just bad things that happen to people over time, and it just happened to happen to this one family. It was a lot of things that were out of their control. You couldn't have expected Barbara to get murdered by one of the escaped criminals.
You're right.
You couldn't have expected, the deer to knock Sam off of a cliff. You couldn't have expected a few of them, but a lot of them were just real poor decision making.
Yeah,
that just ended up biting them in the end.
Yeah, some of them is like, there's definitely a couple that were unavoidable, but like, what's his name, who is flying the kite during the wedding or whatever, when his doesn't one of them, like his dad's getting remarried or something like that. He's like flying the kite, and it's like, and they knew a storm was going to be coming, but there's like, it'll be fine, let's go up to the tent and stuff like that. It's like, well, first of all, like, if you knew there was like a big storm coming, like, cancel the wedding or like figure out something different to do. And they're like, nah, we're fine. It's like,
right, no,
okay,
let's keep
like,
partying. Well,
bunch of idiots. Like, yeah, there's so many of the things where it's just like, if someone would have just thought for 2 seconds, or even the son struggling with the depression, goes and,
that was my next one I was going to talk about.
Oh, go ahead and talk about it then.
So, wait, let me finish the other one. So the end of that one I feel like was real. It was sweet in a weird way, because it fits the aesthetic of the piece that they're trying to, it's the embellishment, of course, of Calvin's death. He flies, in a sense, because he's flying over the cliff. But it's an ode from his brother that, even when you wanted to do something as crazy as fly, you were able to do it. You know, it's a callback to the first line that whatever you wanted to do, you did. You know, you wanted to go around the swing, you did it. And it caused you to fly, but you did what you said you were going to do, you know? And that's how I want to remember my brother. Yeah, so I thought that one was really touching. That's the word I wanted to use. It's a touching, morbid depiction.
Yes.
The next one, I'm trying to keep this a little bit vague so it entices people to be like, what in the world are they talking about? So the next one takes place with Edith's brother, Edith's older brother, Lewis, who works at, he's kind of a listless 20-something-year-old, no real direction. You know, he's just kind of hanging out, doing whatever. And his mom kind of gets sick of it and gets him a job at a fish cannery. Well, Lewis is a real big fan of video games and fantasy and all that different kind of stuff. And he's just really disillusioned with the monotony of the real world.
Mm-hmm.
So this section takes you to his job. You play as Lewis at this point, and you're picking up fish and chopping the heads off and putting them on the conveyor belt to send into the cannery. Well, the cool thing about this one is all the while that you're doing that, you're daydreaming about a fantasy world that you live in, right? And of course, as you, so it has you in the corner with the fantasy world, but the majority of it at this point is the fish cannery. Like you're still here, you know, you're in this reality and you're taking care of your job and you're just sometimes thinking about the fantasy world. But as you go through the segment, the fantasy world starts to get a little bit bigger and it gets a little bit more big. And eventually, of course, it takes up the majority of the screen because Lewis really doesn't care about anything else, you know, in regard to real life. None of it matters to him. And eventually you stop doing the fish cannery stuff and you wholeheartedly jump into the fantasy element of it, where you're exploring the fantasy world and you're becoming a king and you're getting subjects and you're loved by the entire world. And at the end of it, he becomes the king of basically the entire imaginary world that he's made up. And in order for him to get his crown, he has to bend his head down into what, I don't know if he perceives it or if he believes that it's there, but there's a guillotine and it ends up cutting his head off. And of course that, you know, is an allegory for him. He works at a cannery where there are a lot of blades and guillotines, and I'm sure he was, you know, pretty disillusioned with everything here and realized, you know, there's nothing for me here. I can't live in my fantasy world, and that is the biggest disappointment in my life. So I really don't have any more purpose or use for this world. And he, you know, checked himself out. And that is the way that it was done, I think was definitely, this is the most technically impressive and storytelling impressive of the bunch, I feel like. The way that they were able to merge these two things, and even you as the viewer, like you start to get so disillusioned and so into the fantasy part that you forget about the fish and they start piling up, and then you have to go, oh yeah, the fish, and you have to go back to the fish just like he's doing. It's so interesting that they're able to convey that feeling to the player.
Right. Now, do you think this is a little bit of a speculation because obviously there's not really a way to know, but do you actually think he put his head in there? Like, because you just now mentioned like he is one of those things like he like he ended it on purpose, like he put his head in there thinking like there's no more purpose or use in this in everyday life, or do you really think it actually was like him being so fully in the daydream he actually didn't realize he was taking his own life?
Um,
because I interpreted almost like his imagination had grown so big, he didn't even realize what he was doing. Like his actual surroundings around him, he was totally blind to, because he was using a guillotine basically all day at work, cutting off those fish's heads. My thought is like maybe all he like in real life, it was just him like kind of leaning down like a little too close to the guillotine, and that's what ended at him being so engulfed in. So
I
yeah, I didn't take it necessarily as suicide as much as him just being so
I
completely immersed in that world.
I would be with you if the letter from his psychiatrist that you found in the room didn't kind of explain the situation. That's what I inferred when she was like, yeah, he talks about the cannery less and less every time that we meet up. And at this point, he's not even talking about, his real life problems anymore. He's not talking about how he's doing here. He's not talking about his relationships with anybody else or anything like that. Because remember, at one point they were like, his mom came to the factory and like begged for him to come home.
Right.
So like he's not
Yeah.
going anywhere. He's always here, or he's always thinking about whatever that world is.
Yeah.
And I think at some point the psychiatrist does say he's just become disillusioned with the fact that he can't fully enter this world that he's created. I don't remember if that's what it was word for word, but she kind of makes that inference that yeah, that's his main thing, is like he really doesn't have any attachment or care to things of this world. And I think that's kind of why I interpreted it as, well, if there's nothing for him here, and being here is basically just a disappointment because you can't be in the world that you so desperately want to be in, what's the use of being here?
Yeah.
But it's always open to interpretation. So you may be right too. Maybe he was just so caught up, like his therapist was saying, he was so caught up in that world that he didn't even realize maybe he did lean over, or maybe he fell and the fish guillotine got him.
Yeah. Either way, so sad, so tragic. Like
Yeah. I hate the fact that he felt like, there was nothing here for him. Yeah. Was there any other ones that really stood out? You already said Barbara. I said my two for Gregory in that one. I think Milton's was the one that rode the line in the most like, oh, is this a supernatural type of thing? He was the artist.
Yeah,
in the
that
tower
one was
on top of the house.
interesting because, like in reality, they just kind of wrote it off that he just went missing. Like either
he ran away.
He ran away, or maybe he, got swept out in the sea. Like they don't know. He just disappeared. The mother assumed he, ran away, or maybe was kidnapped, because she kept looking for him. Like, I gotta find him. I'm gonna find him. But the story alludes to him like with a magic paintbrush and jumping in through the door, like basically hiding inside of his art. And then what's interesting too is I have not played this game, but there was kind of some confirmation a little bit from the developers that maybe it's connected to the same story in a game called The Unfinished Swan.
Yeah.
And so like almost like they're the same character, which almost would be like, oh, so maybe that was real. Maybe he actually did jump into that painting, and then he shows up in this Unfinished Swan world, and which is crazy to if that was true. But either way, like, yeah, it was kind of
no.
I was just gonna say, yeah, it was just very a very interesting one, because he's the only one who actually like didn't technically die as far as we know. Like, he could very much be alive, and he did run away. Like, maybe he's off and living a happy life, found some parents who actually like weren't going to neglect him, or in a house that's not going to kill him somehow, and living a happy life.
I don't know,
Don't
man.
know.
He's a Finch. I feel like even if he did get away, if he ran away successfully, something probably still got him at some point.
So you believe in the curse? You think there really is a curse, and it's not just a bunch of idiots?
No. I'm just saying,
themselves.
Based on statistics with this family, him being a Finch, running away as a 10-year-old boy, your odds of survival are not very high. I'm just putting it
Yeah.
out there.
Again, I guess my thought though is like, as I already said earlier, like a lot of the deaths come from just other people in the family being, or the person just not, yeah, that being in, to put it,
Ill-advised choices, like
yeah,
running away at
just
10.
being right. But even that, like, okay, he runs away and maybe he again comes across another family who's like super great and ends up taking him in and adopting him or something. Like, yeah, you're right. You don't know, and the chances are stacked against him. But I don't know. I like to think he actually maybe, yeah, found a good place to live and he's living happily. And maybe one day he'll meet up with. Well, we haven't talked about that yet, but
Yeah, we will. We'll get there.
okay.
No, I think the connection between this and Unfinished Swan, I think the developers were just having a little bit of fun with it. It is the same character, but of course, as we break the story down, this is clearly an allegory or a metaphor for him running away. And I think he left the sketchbook there as like a fun goof of like, oh, this is how I ran away, for his family, so that they have something to give them some sort of goofy sense of closure. Like that's his way of saying goodbye to them.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, so it's kind of like well, don't come looking for me because I'm not really here. I don't really exist anymore at this point. That's like what I took of him going through that door of going to a different world is like, yeah, I have left this thing, whatever we have. I'm not here anymore for this. And then just so happens that, he's the character in Unfinished Swan. I think was just a fun coincidence that they were like, yeah, it is the same character, kind of creepy, like they're playing into the supernatural element again.
Yeah, although so Monroe, another character from the Unfinished Swan, who's supposedly Milton's son in the game, the son of the king, they refer to him as another surviving member of the Finches. So, I mean, it's a wiki. Anyone can write anything.
Yeah, I was gonna say I played Unfinished Swan. I don't remember that one. But there was another thing where the king, his wife had died in the Unfinished Swan, so that Finch curse still alive and kicking.
Still alive and kicking, even in a different universe.
You can escape to a whole nother world and it's still gonna follow you.
Yeah.
No, but the king also the game mentions that the king has a nephew. So for our listeners who haven't played the game, Milton is Edith's other brother, which would mean that if he's the king and he has a nephew and Lewis is no longer around, that's right. There is a reveal in the story that Edith is actually pregnant. She's about 5 months pregnant at this point, I believe, about 20 weeks, she said.
Yeah, I forget exactly when, but so this was actually a moment that, excuse me, I feel like I kind of, I don't know if it ruined it, but right at the beginning of the game, I happened to look down at the ground. So and when you look down, you see, I don't know, in a lot of games, you don't see your character at all. If you do, like, it's just very generic, but I look down and you see like your shirt and this big bump and then like, yeah, and then your feet, obviously. I'm like, I'm pregnant. Like, I totally picked it up like within the first 5-10 minutes of the game. I'm like, oh, I'm pregnant. This is crazy. So yeah, I kind of figured that out early on, but then yeah, it definitely kind of like just became more real as it went on, though. The more she kind of talked about it, everyone's stories, and once you get towards the end, you kind of realize what's happening. What the whole game actually is. It's like, oh man, like it was really neat and really sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess we can head that way. So once you've gone through the majority of the Finch family stories and have made it to the last one, which is the one for, unfortunately, for Edith. Um, you realize that Edith ends up dying in childbirth, and
Which
she
can we just
still
say that segment a little weird. Wasn't
was,
a fan.
oh, the birth canal.
It's literally like all of a sudden like at first you don't realize what's going on, and then all of a sudden you're like everything's pink. Oh, wait a second. And then at the end there's just like straight up just a vagina. You're like, okay, here we go.
I mean, that's how babies are born, man. I don't know what else to tell you.
No, it's just like it was a very bizarre thing to experience. I'm like, okay, we're in the birth canal. We're coming out of here.
We're on our way out, man. We're about to make our world debut. No, but Edith ends up dying in childbirth, which would make her son, who we never get a name of, the last surviving Finch. And this entire game, all the times that Edith was talking to herself, or she was explaining something about the house, or she was explaining something about the family history, was all her writing in the journal that she left behind for her son. And it's all kind of an explanation as to why the family is the way that it is. That's kind of what she went back to the house for in the first place, is she was curious about her family history and why it seemed like there was almost a curse that, was following them. But of course it wasn't. It was just unfortunate bad luck that befell a single family over a period of time. But and it was also a lot of trauma and generational issues passed down from a great grandmother, a matriarch who was unwilling to deal with the actual deaths of her family. So she would rather put delusions in the heads of her descendants rather than accept the fact that they made dumb choices or just bad luck befell them, and it kind of ended up screwing up the rest of the family mentally.
Yeah. I feel like, ultimately, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like no one ever learned from their mistakes because no one made mistakes. Everything was just fantastical. And like, it was always an unfortunate event or very fantastical and like fun or goofy or whatever, whimsical. It's like, no, sometimes you need to take a step back and be like, hey, maybe we need to make some changes here.
Right.
Like, I don't know.
Maybe I
feel
should not romanticize the death of my family members every time they die and make a shrine to them, kind of like having an obsession with death. Maybe I should, move forward and actually process it. But
yeah,
what can you do? So yeah, the game sees you as the last remaining Finch. You lay flowers on your mother Edith's grave, and she says that maybe you can be the one who, kind of breaks this cycle of having this weird relationship with our family and death. You can be the one that can see the world for what it is, and maybe you'll have a better chance than the rest of us. And it ends on that note. And man, I gotta say, I freaking love this game.
It was very good. It was a roller coaster.
Yeah. I think it was extremely well done. As far as just the presentation of it itself. Again, I can't get over how well the house was built, but the stories were I don't think there was a story that I was like, that could have been, worked on a little bit more. There were definitely ones that stood way above others, in my opinion, but I didn't feel like I walked out of any story being like, well, I didn't really have to do that one. Like they all had an interesting hook to them.
Yeah.
And I loved the double hidden meaning, I guess, when you're going throughout the game, as far as trying to infer what's actually going on in these people's stories, and how is this situation affecting these generations of this family and their perception of being able to deal with unfortunate events or death, because a lot of these characters did not deal very well with their family members dying at all.
No.
It definitely traumatized quite a few of them, and they ended up making a lot of bad choices themselves because they were convinced that, you know, there was this, you know, bad juju hanging over the family and that it was inescapable. So they were always kind of looking over their shoulder for something to come. Yeah.
Yeah, it was yeah, incredible game. Like the way they laid out the story was just so, it was well paced too. Like I don't know if we've said that, but like they just paced it out very well. Like I think at any point really felt like bored of it. It really was like, okay, finish the one room. Oh, okay, wow, we're in a new room. Like, and there's fun little things you can explore. Like you can just blitz through the room if you want, go right to the memorial, or you can like explore around, and sometimes there's little extra things you can find. And yeah, like the world building was so cool. The stories were neat. Yeah, and I love the kind of like the ups and downs and all over the place where like, yeah, you go from like, wow, that was tragic and horrible to like, oh, that was actually really fun. I enjoyed that. Oh, that was really sweet. Oh man, that's you know, like just morbid and terrifying. Like, oh my gosh, like literally every range of emotion in this game. And they did such a good job with balancing it. And yeah, really making you care. Like at the end, like really being like, yeah, you know what? Like, I hope this last Finch kid, like, I hope he makes it in the world. I hope he like, because, and that's my thought too. Like, I like to think, again, we have no idea what his fate was. Who knows? Maybe like 10 minutes after that segment at the end,
a boulder fell on him or
he
something.
gets hit by a bus. I don't know. But I like to think like maybe because he doesn't have any experience or any exposure to the family, you know, that
to those stories, to that way of thinking,
right.
that they had.
Granted, he has this book, but again, a lot of it is Edith kind of still romanticizing and kind of like fantasizing a little bit. So maybe like you might read it and it might seem more like a fairy tale to him more so than like, oh, these are actual family members. Where like Edith, even Edith being the youngest one before the last kid, she still experienced her mom, her brothers, her dad, like all of her grandparents, aunts, uncles. So I don't know. Yeah, I like to think that the last kid is doing great because he just wasn't like weighed down by this family thing in a sense. Like it wasn't his entire world. It's something that he can read about in a book, close the book and put it away, and that's it.
Or
it's
burn it or whatever.
Or burn it. It's not something he lives with all day, every day. He hears about all day, every day, experiences, has memories
He's
of.
not trapped in a house with basically, you know, in a sense like graves.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I imagine he's off living somewhere else, and it's like, you know, making his own story now, making his own way, his own experiences, his own memories. And, you know, yes, he has that history, and, you know, it's in that book for him to like remember and look back on, and maybe look back on fondly, like, oh man, my mother was so great, like that she thought to even do this for me. But yeah, I like to think like maybe he finally broke that. He broke the curse. Like he finally broke it. But yeah.
Maybe that was the curse. Maybe it wasn't a curse of like a literal, you know, a poltergeist or a boogeyman, but it was a curse of being weighed down with this idea of a curse. The curse was the idea of the curse itself.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and I think that's totally a even a real thing. Like, and that's not something that I think is just made up for a video game. Like I think that happens in reality. I think there's people that I know, I'm like, oh man, like that family just has this, that, and the other thing always happening. But a lot of it is like, it feels like it's almost brought on themselves because, again, of the way, like, so much of your life really, you know, a lot of things in your life can be changed just by your outlook on it, you know? Like, if you have a more positive outlook to a more negative outlook, like, that can really change the type of experiences you have come up in your life, or more optimistic or pessimistic, like whatever it might be. So.
And then also sometimes, you know, bad things just happen to the people who don't deserve it. It's just sometimes the odds they add up that way. You know, your sweet old grandma you know, I this is just for an example's sake. Your sweet old grandma could, you know, fall down a well. Who knows? But
Mm,
that's just the odds of that. That's part of the risk that you take when you live in this world. It's just odds sometimes. It's not necessarily any, you know, malice behind it. It's just a thing that happened. And it just happened to happen to this family, you know, more than most. But statistically, it could happen to this family that many times. Things like that could happen. And it just did in this world. So it's a mixture of both of those things.
hmm. Now, something just popped in my head. Going back to characters and their deaths, do we ever really find out what happened to Edie? Like, we know, like, the people from the uh, care home was like went to go. The nursing home was going to go pick her up from the house, but when they arrived, she was already gone. Right? Do we
I
ever
took that to
know
mean
for
that she was
sure?
dead. Like she
Just
died that
okay.
night.
Okay, I assumed like she left or ran away, but that makes more sense. Like, yeah,
Well,
she
because remember, she was so adamant about I'm not leaving, I'm not leaving. So for her to up and
that's
run
true.
away that quick is like, why did you leave? Why did you put up that much of a fight? You could have just left with those two.
Yeah, that makes sense. Be
Yeah.
glad you're here to set me straight, because I was just like, man, she
I
wasn't
think I
there.
think
Like,
Edith was
what?
just
But
being nice using Gone, you know, to
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
soften the blow. But and I think Edie probably ended up dying of a broken heart. I think that was like her family leaving, and you know, I feel like she was finally coming to terms with the damage that these stories that she was telling her entire family was doing to them,
Mm,
and realizing that she, you know, was partially the cause for this. In a sense, she was the one that disillusioned everybody into thinking that people dying was, oh, you know, Barbara got eaten by monsters, or Molly, you know, turned into a cat and got eaten by a monster herself, or you know, different things like that, or Calvin flew away, you know, and I think she was aware of what telling those stories and actually, you know, almost believing them herself was doing. And I feel
mhm.
like all that kind of came down, and she started to feel the repercussions when all of her family either left her through death or they left her through actually leaving. And she just ended up not being able to take it. And she, you know, it was kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah, man, so sad.
Yeah.
What a sad story.
Yeah. But she's definitely not the only person who, you know, used other methods to cope with people's death, and she won't be the last,
Mm,
you know, in the scope of humanity.
yep.
Uh but yeah, great game.
Fantastic. Go play
um yeah, I freaking love this game. I think it's a modern classic in my eyes as far as storytelling is concerned, and as far as the debate that it, well, I shouldn't say debate, discussion that it invites in, you know, family trauma, or you know, generational trauma and things like that, and how it can affect, you know, way after you're gone. It can still clearly, it can affect people who, you know, you might not even live to see. um and I don't know, that's kind of where I'm at with it. I definitely recommend it. Garrett, you got any final thoughts?
Yeah, I highly recommend it. Again, even though it's this sad, tragic tale, and again, hopefully now that we're announcing the games ahead of time, you guys already played it before listening to this because we spoiled the crap out of it. Although I don't think that should deter you from still playing it, because again, the story is
We
really
kind of,
wonderful to experience it, and we
yeah,
kind of gave you like a Cliff Notes version of a lot of it. Like, you know, obviously we can't put all the emotion and heartfeltness of each of those stories and the ups and downs as well as they do. So, but I, yeah, I highly recommend this because I think they just nailed almost every part of it, and the fact that it's like wrapped up in this sweet little short package as well. Like as I said, like 4 hours you can beat this game in and have like such a range of emotions and reactions, neat stories, great characters. Like the amount of character or like the storytelling and lore building in such a short amount of time is incredible. Like the
hmm,
fact that we just talked like, you know, whatever, we were almost going on an hour, maybe in a little bit here, just shy of an hour, just in just two of us. it's like it's so crazy, and like we didn't even go like super deep. Like there's so much more I feel like we could talk about, like
There's
with
a
each,
ton more.
like there's a bunch of deaths we didn't even talk about, and there's like so minute details in each of those that we didn't even discuss. So incredible what they did here. For being an indie developer, they really nailed it. Once again, Adrian, you were right. Indie games are the best. They're better than AAA games. Yeah, so please go check it out. I feel like it's always on sale. If you had PlayStation Plus at one point, you probably got it for free on PlayStation.
It's literally everywhere. It's on
Yeah,
Switch. It's on
it just came to
Xbox,
phone, right?
PC.
I think it just came to phone.
Yep, I have it on my phone. It's on iOS. I believe it's on Android.
Yeah,
Not 100% sure, but I know for sure it's on iOS. It's on PC, Steam, and Epic. You literally cannot go anywhere and not find this game at this point. And it's worth the entry fee for wherever you can find it at. So I highly recommend it. Well, it sounds like that'll do it. Another episode in the can. Super Gamer Book Club episode 9. Of course, this is going up. I'm assuming this Friday?
Yes, it will be coming out this Friday, April 29th. So if you're listening to it today, happy Friday. Hope you have a good weekend.
Yes, sir. Alrighty. And I didn't talk about the next one. I didn't even tell you yet.
Ooh,
so this one is going to be a fun one. I thought, let's do something a little easy, something a little more spotlight. I guess worthy. Everybody knows this one, but it's, of course, I consider one of the best games ever made. And that is Super Mario World.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
Yeah. So our next book club game is going to be Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or SNES, or Super NES, or Super Nintendo. We do not recognize SNES or SNES in this house, in this corporation. Please do not come around me saying that. You will be escorted off the property. So yeah, now, look out for, what's that?
I have a confession. I've never beat the game before. I've played it millions of times in my lifetime. I've never completed it. Do I need to complete it for next month?
I would advise that yes, sir. Please defeat Bowser and finish the game. That would be
we'll see.
Now, Super Mario World is not as long as you think. It's probably about 5 hours if you really, well, not even that. Maybe like 3 to 4 if you like hammer at it.
I guess with the magic of the Switch Online, you can do save states, right? So that'll help. That way, if I run out of lives, I don't have to start over, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I can just cheat my way through it. Whatever it takes.
I don't think so, sir. What did that tweet say? You cheated yourself and you cheated the game when you use save states. Yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so our book club choice for May is going to be Super Mario World. Again, we'll be recording that at the end of May. So you've got from now all the way until the end of next month. Honestly, you should really be able to knock it out like in a week if you give it an hour a night or so. But I am going to try to nail down a couple of guests that I have in mind for it. So keep your eyes peeled. I am definitely looking forward to what these two have to say, because I know they have a lot of opinions on Nintendo games and they have a lot of history and knowledge. So I'm really hoping that they're going to show up. If not, we'll figure something out. I mean, you and I just did this one. We can do it again. I'm fine with that. But for episode 9, we are going to close out, and that's another one for the books. Garrett, where can they find you?
They can find me, on our regular podcast each and every Wednesday. Super Gamer Boys, obviously, if you're listening to this, you probably know about that. But go listen to it, please. Tell all your friends about it. Tell your friends about this show, too, Super Gamer Book Club, because I feel like we have lots of downloads on the main show. I feel like people still don't realize, like, this, both.
It's popping over here.
You can listen to this on Patreon, but then there's also the free feed out there, too. And you can go listen to the free feed. So listen to all the Super Gamer Boy stuff, our main show, this show. You can find me on social media at Twitter and Instagram at gmorlang, where, JJ's
podcast.
I basically just retweet Adrian's tweets because I'm too too lazy to write my own tweets, and Instagram is just my photography. So go check it out. Yes. Also, if you're looking for more Super Gamer Boy stuff, produced by Super Gamer Boys. Now, I was talking with JJ the other day. I'm like, kind of messing with them. They're like joking around, like, so yeah, this isn't an official Super Gamer Boy show. It's produced by Super Gamer Boys, but it's not like under the umbrella. He's like, ha ha ha, yeah, okay. But the Suplex City Wrestling podcast, where him and his buddy Scott talk wrestling, comes out every Friday. It's a weekly show. Fantastic. I know nothing about wrestling. I don't watch wrestling. I know like certain touchstones just in pop culture of certain people like The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, and I could Macho Man Randy Savage, but I couldn't tell you what any of them look like other than The Rock, because he's been in a movie before. John Cena, I know him, he's been in a movie.
See, you know more than you thought.
But like, again, like I couldn't tell you who any of them look like, what any, like if you had a lineup and like, okay, pick out Triple H, I'm like, I don't know, like, you kidding me? Who's that? The Undertaker, I don't know. I assume it's the guy in the dark clothes, maybe. I don't know. Maybe he wears a sunshine tank top, I don't know. But I've been really enjoying the show. With all that to say, I don't know anything about wrestling, and I've been enjoying it, so go check it out. Suplex City Wrestling Podcast. Very good and very fun, and a fun new just. Yeah, it's JJ being a little more serious. Like, he's very passionate about wrestling, so it's very interesting to listen to him and like, oh, he's not to say he's not fun, like he's not. So yeah, it's not to say he's not having fun, but it's still like, oh, he's not his goofy, crazy, like making like penis joke self. It's him like, yeah, a lot more to serious because he's passionate about it. So go check it out. It's good.
And you can find me any and everywhere on social media or game services at Homeboy. Thanks again for riding with us for another episode. That'll do it for episode 9, and we will see you next month. Take it easy. We're out.
Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for hanging out with us. I hope you enjoyed the episode. As a reminder, if you want to catch any of the new episodes the first Friday that they come out of every month, you can find them only on our Patreon. That's patreon.com/supergamerboys. And don't forget to check out our main episodes too. Those are pretty cool if I say so myself. All right, we're out of here. Peace.